All right, on this grim anniversary of the first year since the invasion of Ukraine, I think we must be reminded yet again of the sovereignty of nations and the rule of international law. And within that context, what should the United States be doing? What is our role in all of this moving forward? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is FRC's Executive Vice President, General Jerry Boykin, who, by the way, spent the last 4 years of his brilliant 36-year military career serving as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense and Intelligence, and he was also one of the original members of the Army's Delta Force. General Boykin, as always, great to have you on the program. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jody. It's always good to be with you.
Well, listen, I feel like I've got a million questions. I'm just loaded up. I've got all kinds of paperwork here and the questions coming all over the place. But here we are 1 year in the anniversary of this invasion. And just generally speaking, to start with, what are your thoughts?
This was a war of miscalculations on behalf of Vladimir Putin. He miscalculated the response of NATO. NATO's never been more unified. He miscalculated the response of the European Union. And most importantly, he missed it altogether in terms of the capabilities and willingness to fight of his own military. They have been an abysmal failure, and about 200,000 that we know of now have been wounded or killed in a fight that they thought was going to last about 3 days.
You know, that's a stunning number, 200,000. And yeah, I mean, I'm reading here today, Zelensky's speech was incredible. Again, tremendously inspiring. What are you saying? And he's saying, listen, we're going to win this war this year. 2023 is going to be the year of victory. Is that we're not waving a white flag. We're waving our flag. We are not fleeing. We are facing up to the Russians. On and on he goes. I don't think anyone a year ago really understood the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And as you said, Vladimir Putin, he was expecting a cakewalk, wasn't he?
I don't think there's any question about it. He thought he was going to establish a Russian-friendly regime there, and it really in a matter of days, maybe weeks, and that didn't happen. And one of the things, though, that has been most interesting to me is the way his young soldiers have done everything they could to get out of this war. Many of them just took off and walked back into Belarus. Others just abandoned their equipment, their tanks, their personnel carriers, their artillery pieces, and made their way back into Russia, up into the eastern part there. And I tell you, I have been surprised at how the Russian people have reacted as well. And that is they've arrested over 20,000 people for protesting this war. And that is something that is basically unheard of. I think the last miscalculation like this was probably when Hitler went into to Russia itself during World War II.
Wow, I was not aware of the numbers being that large. That is, that's one of those things is you've got to believe will come back to haunt Putin, so to speak. But let's real quickly talk about the bigger picture here. What should we take from this? Particularly, General, I'm thinking when we are discussing, pondering our adversaries such as both Russia and China, which I think we must look at China in all of this as well, particularly in light of what I believe, and I'd like your opinion, this whole thing with Russia and Ukraine started because of the weakness of the Biden administration. Would you agree with that? And if so, doesn't this play into China and what we could potentially expect from them?
Yeah. First of all, I think that there are some things that are really hard to understand right now. I just read a couple of reports that Xi is asking to meet with Zelensky, and Xi is calling for the two sides to come together and negotiate. That is unusual and also a little surprising to me. But I also think that Xi is looking at this as, and I don't think a lot of people would agree with me on this, but I think she is looking at this and the drubbing that the Russians are getting, and I think he's probably assessing now what they have to do to be able to take the Ukraine and not wind up in the same situation that Putin is in right now. I said the Ukraine, I meant Taiwan.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'm getting to. Don't you? I mean, we look at the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. That had to motivate Putin to move ahead, saying we have weakness in the White House here. And then, as we watch the response of this past year, it's got to encourage China, potentially with Taiwan. We've only got about a minute left, but how seriously do we need to be considering China, as you just mentioned, in Taiwan right now? This seems to me a serious issue.
China is a constant threat. So even if this wasn't going on, China would still be a threat. I will say this as the last thing. I am so tired of hearing this administration talk about the things they won't do or won't give the Ukrainians because they're afraid of escalation. Escalation? Are you serious? This could go away all overnight if Vladimir Putin wasn't escalating this, and that's what he's doing every day that he stays on the ground in the Ukraine. We got to find our courage and really do what's best for the Ukrainians so that they can have a real chance of defeating the Russians.
Well, you know, spending billions of dollars is not the answer to all of this. I mean, we're in the ballpark of what, over $100 billion. This is bigger than that. I mean, Ukraine is the immediate, but beyond Ukraine is both Russia and China. I think we've got to keep our focus on what those are doing and what our response is going to be to shut them down in the midst of this issue with Ukraine.
Well, you can bet that China is exploiting to the extent that they can. They're exploiting this whole thing, and they're exploiting the Russians probably more than the rest of the world. And the Russians right now are in a situation where they need China so desperately that they're just about willing to do whatever they have to do to get China's support.